Good afternoon and welcome to the last day of Orkney International Science Festival 2022 in this Scotland's Year of Stories. My name is Eric Walker and it's my pleasure to be hosting this session, both in person here in Kirkwall and also live online via YouTube. Our speakers today are Professor Carol Norris-Shorto and Susan Affleck. Carol is on faculty in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Maryland. Her professional focus has been infant mental health. She and colleagues published a book last year, We Cuddle and Grow, a practical intervention guide for nurturing attachment in early childhood environments, which is based on 22 years of working with the trauma and attachment concerns of homeless babies and their parents. Carol's a licensed social work, family therapist and registered play therapist. Susan is the Positive Destinations Manager for Midlothian Sure Start and has worked for the organisation for 7 years. She has a background in community education, having gained her BA degree from the University of Edinburgh and her Professional Development Award, the hard way degree, basically, in childhood practice at Edinburgh College. Something that happens so often in social work and in mental health, and in many other areas, is that professionals say that people don't understand, and the people say, we're not being understood. Well, there's a new strategy seeking to bring everyone together to tackle problems. It was initially developed to work with babies and parents, and it's now been taught to mental health clinicians, physicians, lawyers, administrative and policy professionals. It's about tuning in and interacting and building relationships, and it's called FAN, Facilitated Attuned Interaction. And Carol and Susan are eager to tell us all about this innovation. Now, I want to encourage everyone watching, both here in the cinema and also online, to take part. Could you enter your comments, although you have a different system, don't you? We'll make it work. You can still ask questions via live chat or using the app Slido. You can point your smartphone at the QR code that will be on your screens at the moment, but there is another way that Carol and Susan will be telling you. For the people in here in the cinema, we'll also be passing the microphone around the audience as well to give you the chance to ask questions, which I think we'll be taking that at the end, and I'll pass them on to the speakers after that. So, without further ado, Carol and Susan, it's over to you.
First of all, let me say that we are delighted to be here. And I want to thank all of you for being here, because without you, this wouldn't be an event. And this is the last day of 7 days of wonderful talks. So thank you so much for making time in your schedule to be here. I also want to thank the wonderful Orkney Science Festival folk that have made this possible. We're very grateful to Howie Firth and his wonderful team, Eric and Louisa, and I'm sure I'll leave people out, but I want to recognize the wonderful I-Team support people that are here that have made this work for us and made it work for so many other people here, and they've been at it for 7 days. I think they deserve a thank you. Please join me. So we thought we might tell you just a little bit more about ourselves, and then we want to find out a little bit more about you. So thank you, Eric, for your kind introduction. And you might guess, without a lot of more words, that I'm not an Orcadian. I've come across the pond thanks to our wonderful cousins Alan and Jill Lamed and their son Stuart. We're here primarily because they are a big draw for us, and they were the ones that shared this wonderful event and the possibility of talking with you. So I just want you to know, when Eric says that we're enthused about being here, that's absolutely true. Do I need to move so I don't get the, okay. That's absolutely true. I've been at this for 48 years in mental health, and this approach is the best overarching, consolidating way of thinking about engaging people. So I'm really fairly passionate about it. Susan, anything else you want to share?
Just hello, my name's Susan Affleck. I'm the Positive Destinations Manager for Midlothian Sure Start. Just want to thank you all for welcoming me here today. I've travelled from Edinburgh with my parents. Thank you for keeping me company on the ferry. And I would just like to apologise, because on the schedule it did say that my CEO Cheryl Brown would be here today. Unfortunately she wasn't able to travel, so I was really lucky to be able to step in and take her place today. So she's not here, but she's watching online, so thank you.
We're very grateful for Cheryl being online, as we are all the people online. So thank you so much for that. Now, people online, would you please sign into the chat and tell us roughly where you're from? We don't need specifics, but are you Arcadian? And could I please have hands up for those of you that are Arcadians? This is our chance to get to know you. One Arcadian. Do we have two Arcadians? 3 or 4? Okay, any other Arcadians? Okay. How about folks that are from the mainland of Scotland? Do we have, more hands from the mainland of Scotland? Very good, very good. Thank you for being here. Now, how about folks from other parts of the UK? Do we have anyone? A couple others, good. You traveled, we really got to make this worth your while. And then have people from the Netherlands. That would include me. I do apologize for making this. That would me. Anyone else from outside the UK or across the pond? Well, thank you. How wonderful that a few of us are here. Have I missed anyone? Has everyone gotten their hand up at least once? Okay. Now, Susan and I are very concerned that you can hear us. So if you can't hear us, you've all had practice of putting your hands up. And I'm very specifically going to ask you, if you cannot hear us, give us this signal, okay? You know, you've put your hand up, got it? Okay, and is that an okay, Jill, or you're having trouble?
No, it's not very clear. You were not as clear as you ought to be.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Robbie, is there anything I need to do to be clearer?
To be clearer?
Yes.
I'll go with a feedback issue. You can get like a tinniness.
Take a bit of talk.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. And Robbie and Jill will put me on the straight and narrow, hopefully. But it is important to us that you're able to hear what we say. So please do use that hand to let us know, and we'll do our very best to work with it. Okay? Okay, so I am inviting you. I think it was brilliant that Howie came up with the title of Tuning In and Understanding. The first part of tuning in the fan is tuning into ourselves. So by that I mean that if we're interested in engaging people, and just sidebar so you know this, I'm coming to you with this as a professional tool. However, this is a tool that applies to anyone who considers themselves a human being. Because being a human being, the majority of the time means being in relationship. And so this is a tool that can be used being in relationship. So I'm bringing to you this tool, but I'm hoping that you'll find something today that you can take in for yourself. And the first thing we're going to do is start with ourselves. So on the screen you see a mindful moment. We have to be balanced and steady and fully present to be able to tune in. So I'm going to invite you to join me. Now you do not have to do this. If you choose to follow the suggestions I offer you, lovely. please do. If it doesn't work for you, I'm inviting you to just kind of step aside in your mind and be curious and see if there's something else in this intentional moment that works for you. So, inviting you to intentionally feel balanced in your chair. I'm going to do my best to feel balanced standing up here. Notice, first of all, and you can do this eyes open or closed, it doesn't matter as long as you feel safe. Begin to just notice your breath. You might even choose to put a hand on your belly and a hand on your chest. Without changing anything, just begin to notice where your breath is coming from in your body. Is it coming from your abdomen? Or is it your chest? Just noticing where the breath is coming from. Now you'll notice sounds in the room. That's perfectly fine. This intentional moment isn't about escaping. It's about being fully present. We'll notice the door opening, and that's okay. We just let that thought drift out of our mind and bring ourselves back to, where is my breath coming from? And now inviting you to notice your feet. Notice the ball of your foot. Maybe even wiggle your toes in your shoes. Notice your heel. Then, with amusement, notice the part of your foot that does not touch your shoe. The space, the opening, the arch. And now inviting you to pay attention to this marvelous gift of being able to hear, whatever level that is. Listening for the sounds of the room, the foot shuffle, the paper rustle, the echo of the mic, and then bringing your listening very intentionally to your own person. Perhaps you'll hear a tummy rumble. A little early for tea time, but tummy rumbles are allowed. And finally, inviting you to have your eyes, if they happen to be closed, a gentle openness with a downward gaze, restful. And as you open your eyes, just take in the full view that you have, and then allow your eyes to zero in on one spot and notice something specific with curiosity. What's different about that spot? The light? The shape? And then when you're ready, come back and join in the full group in the auditorium. And now that you are coming back, I'm inviting you to just pause for a moment, that intentional moment that was your moment. For that moment, were you able to stop your monkey mind? Were you able for that moment to focus on your own body awareness? That's bringing balance. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But we really want you to have a bit of an experience of what this engagement tool, and that's the first step.
Okay. Moving on. So, Midlothian Sure Start was started over 25 years ago. Its history was embedded in supporting some of the hardest to reach families across Midlothian. Midlothian Sure Start Midlothian Sure Start works because our fundamental core values are to listen to the needs of the families. Cheryl, who's not here today, has worked really closely with Carol to embed the FAN process into our model of practice, and it works really well because it fits with our core values.
I'll tell you a little bit about the FAN and how it originated. It started at the Erickson Institute, that's named after Erik Erikson, the wonderful developmental psychologist that spoke about the 8 stages of life. He was very much revered, and so they named this institution after him. It's in downtown Chicago, and it is devoted to infant mental health. And so you'll see here on this, the slide that there's a number of professional post-college degrees that they offer, all oriented to infant mental health. And you might be interested to know that this FAN now is adopted statewide in more than 3/4 of the states in the United States, and Scotland is the 8th country that is now learning about the FAN and bringing it into their work in mental health areas. We train a variety of people. So although it started in infant mental health, it's now being adopted by a lot of other professions. As you can see internationally, we've trained lawyers, judges, guardians ad litem, which are court-appointed children's advocates, a number of child welfares, teachers in classrooms use this all the time, certainly crisis intervention, and administration and managers are useful. So do we need to do something differently?
There and don't move, please.
Oh, that's a tough one. I'll do my best. All right. Good luck keeping me in one spot. I'll do my best.
So Carol kindly delivered FAN training for Midlothian Stewart employees about a month ago or so now, and the idea is that now that we have been trained, that a certain few of us will go on and we will be able to train more people across Scotland. But within Midlothian Sure Start, some of the people that have been trained are our therapists, our early years practitioners, support workers, our development workers, our family support workers, and our administrators. And it's really important that when we have been able to access, the staff have been able to access this training because they're going out and they're working with the people on the ground.
And in their homes.
And in their homes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So if there's one slide you were going to remember from this presentation, this would be it. And that's the definition of attunement. Now, you all know attunement, even if you don't know that word. It's about feeling matched, connected, on the same page. And there's that factor that just really helps you feel connected to each other. So the definition is when someone feels truly understood, known, and I would add, seen and heard. The attunement that occurs creates a space. So when people feel rigid and stuck, when they can feel felt, heard, and understood, there's an opening in their way of being, and they can begin to see their problems from different angles. Not that it's necessarily solved easily, but they can see it from different angles. And that is why Sure Starts and why our work puts the client's or the person's concern centermost in our work. Now, you'll see that the FAN is named that because it's in the shape of a fan. And there are a lot of words on this slide, I grant you that, but the two things I hope you'll pay attention to is the center pink circle. It starts with the concern of the person or family, and then the words over the arch of the fan: calming, feeling, thinking, doing, and reflecting. I'm going to briefly take you through to just give you a snippet of what that means, because that is the process that we go through to tune in and understand. There's a way that there's kind of like a GPS. Now, I'm an old timer, so I think in terms of maps. It's kind of my map. But for you younger folk, it's the GPS for how to get to where you want to go. So let me share a little piece of not well-known research that really impacts our understanding of tuning in. I said earlier, being human in general means being in relationship to the people around you, whether you want to be or not. The research tells us, it's from Ed Tronick and his work with both families and children and married couples, that if we can achieve that matching, that attunement, 30% of the time, we are doing great. 70% of our time in human relationship is spent trying to get back to that attunement. Therefore, in the fan, a great deal of time is spent doing the things that are on this slide. Observing the other person's cues, realizing when we're not in attunement, and trying to get back to that attunement by making an offering. Maybe I didn't understand you, madam. Can you help me understand more about this? Checking in. Are we on the right page here? Are we getting to what you wanted? And we're going to do that in this group in just a few moments. And then moving to try to reattune. So again, 70% of our time in all of human relationships is about trying to be attuned. So that's why it's not easy, folks. That's why they want to talk about this, because it's not easy to achieve this. Next slide. So this is the arc, and this is kind of my GPS. So, and you've already started on this with us. So before we did anything, at the beginning of that arc, we did an intentional moment, a mindful moment. That's important whenever you're going in to work with a client, or whether we're going into what you anticipate might be a rather difficult discussion with someone that you care about. It's to take a deep breath, to be as balanced and present as you can be. Now the second part of this arc is about understanding what it's like for you. And we're going to do something around that in just a moment. The middle part, in about 5 or 10 minutes, we're going to check in with you. Are we getting to what you wanted to hear about today? Again, back to that concern. Why in the world you took the time to come to this talk? The end is that, very specifically, taking time to reflect before you leave a situation even. Because, again, research, this comes out of adult education, tells us that if you take the time in the moment to reflect on what you've understood and learned, you're much more likely to retain it. So that's built into the way that we do this reflective engagement work. And then you can, we're going to be asking you now and then to jot in a note or two. In fact, I think you all have 2 little pieces of paper, and if anyone doesn't, raise their hand and we'll make sure you get them. If we've missed anyone. You've gotten 2 little pieces of note paper. Jill, this lady could use a couple if you have it extra. Thank you. So I'd like you to put a couple, and you need one right here too. So maybe if you could bring down a couple to the front, we want to make sure you have one too. What I'm asking you to do is right now, jot down a word or two that comes to your mind from doing that intentional moment. What did you experience in your body? This isn't for us, this is for you. What did you experience in that intentional moment? Because then you will begin to think about an intentional moment, perhaps in times that would be useful to you.
Jill, down here, please.
Right here.
Lady at the front.
Coming, madam. So that piece of it, we're going to talk about a little bit more later, and I'll be asking you to jot a note or two down on that piece of paper as we go. The second piece of paper is for you, just so you have a little something to take with you from today's talk. So, attunement. What's the difference between saying, how's it going? Or saying, what has the day been like for you so far?
Quite often, we have a habit of saying, hello, how are you? And you reply, I'm fine, thank you, and you carry on. But actually, in reality, you're not fine. So rather than replying with an honest answer, you say, I'm fine, you walk on. And this fan is not that. Fan is actually taking the time and the intention of asking for, and then intentionally listening. So it's taking the time to ask and then fully listen. So
what we're going to ask you to do, if you feel comfortable doing this, is, and you probably are sitting beside folk you know, so those of you that are sitting beside someone, even if you know them, we'd invite you to turn to that person and say, what has the day been like for you? And just listen. Don't talk, don't respond other than your body language. Tell them in your body language with your facial attention, perhaps leaning forward, just listen. And even if you know them well, find out what the morning or the day so far has been like for them. We're going to tell you in a minute and a half. The person with, let's say the person with the longest hair goes first. And the person with the longest hair, whoever you decide, but don't take a lot of time about it, goes first and say what the morning has been, or the day so far has been like for them. We'll let you know when a minute and a half is up, and then you're going to switch roles. Again, this is about listening, not at this point interacting. You're giving them your nonverbal attunement attention. Now, those of you that are sitting by yourself, if you choose to join another group, please do. If you prefer to sit by yourself, I'm going to invite you to think about what you would have liked someone to have known about your day. Okay? What is it you wish that someone had just taken an extra moment to hear you say or to ask you about? And that can be both good or bad. But just give that thought, the difference that Susan has just said about how's it going, or really listening to learn. So, inviting you to do it in the way that is most comfortable for you, and we'll let you know when to switch. I'm going to really speed up. Online folk, we would invite you to please do the same. Chat with anyone that you happen to be with about their day and listen. Otherwise, write down a word on a piece of paper what you wish someone would know about your day. A minute and a half could go very fast. So would you reverse roles now? To listen rather than to respond. Just listen at this point. We're not going to make it in terms of time. We may have just breathe. Just breathe. I have to. But it suits me. It may be difficult to try and aim it. We can intervene. Good job. Now, with apologies, please, I invite you to come back. I would have been delighted to have been able to give you more time, but I'm very respectful of your time, and I really want to make sure we have some time for questions at the end. What I'm asking you to do, would anyone share a word or two what it was like to be the speaker and say what the day was like for them? And people at home, again, and online, please share a thought either with the person with you or online, what that was like to be the person to speak about what their day was like. Anyone interested? Yes. Oh, fine, in the back. Thank you so much. How about if we take you first?
It was very refreshing.
Refreshing.
Be very open with someone that you don't know.
Yes. Well, thank you. And you, madam?
I was with this lovely woman here, and I felt really heard. I could really tell that she was listening very carefully. You know, she was really actively listening, and it felt really good. And so I felt able to say what I really wanted to say.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, but often the power is not in the words the other person is saying, but their presence. And that's what we're hoping you take from this little exercise. It's about listening with your full presence, not necessarily your words. And it's harder often to listen with your presence. So thank you for sharing. And folk online, please share your thoughts. Eric is going to monitor that for us if any of you care to share your thoughts as well. Now, because our challenge is to give you a little snippet of this, we're going to move on. And I just want to, did you care to share anything on that, Susan? The next slide.
Yeah. All right.
No, next slide. There you go. Mm-hmm.
That's fine. So, family support workers from Midlothian Sure Start were trained in the FAM. By being trained, we'll be able to see more from the parent's perspective. We are shifting away from the fixing people to partnering with them, and we begin to see good collaboration come to fruition. Parents will figure out for themselves what they need to do, and will start making positive actions, and as Carol was saying, move into positive destinations. And practitioners, as a result, will also become less stressed, and we will see greater job satisfaction. People are they're calmer, they're able to think more clearly in stressful interactions, and we reduce staff burnout. We don't have them trying to fix everybody, but instead just have those conversations.
And staff burnout translates into money. Those of you that are administrators, you know that. If you could keep good staff, you're saving yourself money. So, moving into the FAM, let's talk about that first wedge, the mindful self-regulation. Oh, I apologize. Let's go to the next slide, please. I want to translate that fancy wedge into more understandable words. So let's look at calming. That's what you started with. When you are dysregulated, it's hard to be fully present. So therein is the challenge. Feeling, being aware of when the person you're speaking with are in big feelings, and being prepared to hold that rather than immediately try to fix them. The third one is thinking. Now this requires a huge change in our listening, because it's not the way we think we can help them, but it's listening so that they can think. They can find that opening, that space to be able to look at their problem from different viewpoints and find their own best solution. And clearly the research has supported when the family feels they have found a solution that works for them, it's much more effective. So that's our goal, both professionally and personally. The fourth wedge is doing. Now, I'm in a room full of doers. I can tell because you got yourself here. You're doers. This is the wedge that we have the most experience with. There's a few little slants that we can offer you on how to make that doing more engaging. But this is one where we spend a lot of time, so we move on to the fifth wedge, which is the reflecting. And I've just explained how when we pause to reflect in the moment, we're much more likely to take with us what's important to remember. Next slide. So, the mindful self-regulation wedge. Susan, why is it important for staff to take intentional moments before beginning their sessions?
So often it's important to be present. You have to be able to listen. Quite often, well, certainly within Midlothian and Sure Start, we can often have meetings back to back to back to back. You're often rushing, and you don't often have time to sit down and really focus before you go into the next meeting. So this is why mindful self-regulation is important. It gives us permission to stop, take the time, and to calm yourself down, to be fully present before you begin.
So I would just add to what Susan has said that and you heard the words when we started today, it's about balance. And it's, of course, balance for your mind. But equally important is balance in our body, because when we can bring our body to fully present, that's what the breath work, the feeling your toes was all about, really being aware of your body, then your mind has a better chance to balance. So that's a big piece of mindful self-regulation. And this is clearly true, that when it's not possible to work on behalf of human beings to try to help them without having powerful feelings ourselves, that's what the urge to fix is all about. We usually feel that when we really care about someone and we want to make things better, and we've got all kinds of great ideas about how they can do it differently. That's what that urge is. It's a very well-intentioned feeling to want to fix. And Fan is suggesting to us that we do just the opposite. We pull back and we hold a space for them to figure it out themselves. So, you've experienced about 4 ways to approach an intentional moment. So the first one was breathing. Remember, I had you consider whether your breath was coming from your chest or your belly. Belly breaths tend to give us a more deep breath, a more refreshing breath. The second one was movement, or grounding. Now, I couldn't have you all walk around intentionally here, but literally feeling and wiggling your toes in your shoes helps you pull down your awareness into your body. Little sidebar tip. If you're ever in a meeting and it's boring and you're having a hard time staying awake, try wiggling your toes. It's a good tip. Freebie, no charge for that one. So grounding is just a really good way of bringing yourself to balance. Self-talk. Now, I had you do intentional listening. So you listen to what was in the room and then you listen to your own body. We can use our ears to bring us to fully present. And the fourth one is using our vision. What we would see in our mind, in our mind's eye to bring us to calm, or using what's right in front of us. You'll need to know, I focused on number 13, this chair. And in my mindful moment, all of a sudden that number wasn't important, but that silver around it became glistening. That was my little curious moment of using my sight for for mindfulness. Next slide. Now let's talk a bit about empathic inquiry. So this is the wedge when we are really holding the big feelings. Why is that one important for your staff, Susan?
So parents and children we work with often come to us with these big feelings. We take time to listen to them, we hear what they're saying, we hold those feelings for them, and we allow them to travel along their own path and explore them in their own time.
Okay, and you will see on this slide, it's a newborn baby. And look at the amount of expressions, of feelings that baby is showing us right here. So there are about 4 steps that when we do the full Fan training, people learn about, but essentially it's holding, being able to just sit with another person's intense feelings. It's not easy without wanting to fix them. So that's what the Fan helps us understand. Next slide. And I think probably one of the best people that addresses this concept of holding the feelings is Brene Brown, who is a professor, social work, and does a lot of research in the area of empathy and attunement. And so let's listen how she explains it. Empathy, not sympathy.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
If I could have that hand extension, thumbs up if we're headed in the right direction, middle point if we need to do something else, and give us a thumbs down if we're off base. Okay, checking here, checking. Okay, how are we doing? Are we doing? Oh, middle line, okay, all right. We're going to do our best. Anything specifically you'd like us to address? Anything specifically? Okay, do our best. So we're moving now into the next wedge of the fan, which is collaborative exploration. That's the thinking, and not what we think will fix folks, but opening the space for people to think about their situation differently. Why is this important for your staff, Susan?
So parents will often, again, it's the same thing, parents will find the solutions to their own problems. Again, we move away from that fixing to supporting.
We use the train picture here because when you get on that fixing train, it just feels like it's building up steam and you got more and more ideas to help the person, and before you know it, you're going right down the track, but you go right by the station. Because it's about slowing down so you can figure out when that person has gotten to the place where they need to be. So we often refer to it as a fixing train because of the momentum that can be built up. When you know the answer, but they haven't figured out what works best for them. So we want to share a cultural variable that we think sheds some light on this. So
Carol was telling me that in the States, amber means caution, stop. Over here, it kind of means be prepared to stop or be prepared to go. And that's exactly what FAN is. It's being intentional about what we want to explore together. It's about stopping to listen.
the fourth wedge of the fan is about doing. And again, there's a number of little strategies that we can do to help the doing that we all need to do in our daily life. It's important that we do. And why don't we just show the one, let's go to yours. Let's go to the love looks. Yes. So tell them about this approach. When you see that attunement happen, what do we do?
This picture here captures it perfectly for us. It's that angel moment. It's that moment of where this picture is one of our dads with his newborn son. He had attended our dad's TV group and came back after he'd had his baby to show us our baby. And when he attended this group, this picture was taken. But you can see here the attachment and the attunement between dad and baby. And there is no words here, there is no communication except for you can see the non-verbal cues, you can see that eye to eye, and we class that as the love looks or the angel moments.
And that's what we all want in our lives. We want those love looks. We want, and it's the holding again of the good attunement. So we don't need to say a lot. We don't need to explain why this is a good moment. It's just savoring when you do feel connected. The last wedge is what we're getting to right now. It's the integration. And for those of you here in the audience, if you did find anything that was useful to you today, we would invite you on that one slip of paper to jot a note or two of something that might be worth your remembering. Remember that second piece of paper is for you, the little note with you. It's a little minding of today. But that first note, if you would just jot a word or two, folks that are at home, or online, we would invite you to put in the chat a word or two of something that you would remember. And Eric, I think if they want to use their phones and the Q code, they can put that in. We might be able to get a word cloud up here if enough people participate to integrate. So if I would invite you to do that at this moment, and then with that piece of paper, on your way out the door, there's a big poster that you'll see the fan and the arc on the poster, and just stick your note up on it. And that's going to be part of what Susan and I will do at the end of the day, our day, as a way of reflecting and doing our own mindful and intentional reflection of the day, is reading what was useful to you or not. Both are very important for us to know. So I thank you so much for participating in this and getting a little taste of what the fan is like. As we've said, Sure Starts in Midlothian is leading the way in bringing this to Scotland. I will be happy to stay afterwards for questions of those that aren't satisfied. We're going to take a few questions now. I'm happy to stay for a few minutes longer if anyone else needs more time. And then also contact with Susan for what's going on here in Scotland. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much for that, Carol and Susan. It's opened my eyes up, again, having been through management for years, I've been involved in many behavioural, cognitive type things, but I can see how this has all been put together. The exercise we did at the beginning, I loved the mindful moment session. It reminded me of, we got training 3 years ago to be these speaker hosts, because it's a different thing, from what we normally do. We had a bit of a session previous to the one that we're here to just now, and what it did was it took the bad edge off me, but left the good edge. It didn't take edge off, it just took negative stuff. So there's just a bit of feedback.
So let me just repeat, for those of you that might not have heard Eric's comment, he's saying that the previous session had a few glitches, IT glitches, right?
Yeah.
That was it, and so it was a little difficult. And he found a mindful moment took the bad edge off. It didn't necessarily make it that much better, but it just took the bad edge off, which is a very good explanation of what mindful, intentional moments do. Thank you, Eric. We'd welcome any other questions? Yeah? Yes.
It's lovely to see you here in Scotland.
Thank you.
I would like to know how you would envisage spreading the word of Fan throughout poorer countries, less developed countries. Would that be something you would be interested in doing?
Well, I can tell you that it's being used in India with a mentoring program where there are community people that are working with others in their community. It's being used in Israel and New Zealand. It's also being used in Australia, and their work there with the indigenous people. So I know that there's some effort to this. Really, FAN is still pretty new. It's just about maybe 20 years old, and not even hardly that. So it's gradually going, but as Eric mentioned, I work in inner city. For 22 years, I worked in inner city, one of the poorest communities in Baltimore, and it was incredibly effective. So we're building on that experience. So thank you, Caroline. That's our dream. That's our dream, that we would get to do that. Thank you. Yes, I'll be right with you, Stewie. Let me just answer this question. Yes.
Sorry, I missed the question, the beginning of the question that person asked.
Caroline asked if, are we taking this to countries that are not as well, under resource challenged countries? And the answer was, that's our intent.
Yeah. And my question is, how can this be available for everyone? Because it's very fundamental, isn't it, as to what supports each of us in our connections with each other. And I think this is a very valuable toolkit. Is there a way of being able to access it online, or are there any possibilities of that happening with videos or anything like that?
Your question is very well founded, and we've found that in COVID, we have done a lot of online training. In fact, we trained the Midlothian staff online. It's very much about relationship, and I would want anyone participating to be in a training that involves people who understand relationship. So you saw Brene Brown's video. Millions have seen it, but taking that in, I often say about the FAN, it's so simple, it's hard. What I'm telling you is not new information, what Susan and I bring to you, but integrating it into what we do is so hard. So you should know that although we do a 12-hour course to teach the language and more detail of what I've shared with you today, thereafter it's a process that takes 18 months to really shift the thinking into thinking about it in this framework. So my answer to you is we're doing our best to make it more, in the framework of social justice, to make it more available through online opportunities.
Thank you, I really appreciate your answer and I really understand it. I'm just wondering if there's a way where there could be some tips, sort of overarching tips that could be available, just to help people start to get into that process. I appreciate that there is a whole process of learning and being in a group and learning together and going through the different steps.
Oh, that's an excellent question. Thank you for that clarification. On your little piece of paper, it says Erickson Institute. Please go online and look them up, and you will find the FAN is available online. And I do know they have a program called Fussy Baby, which really helps parents with young children. And I'm pretty confident there's some online possibilities. If you want more, come and down and let me take your email, and I will find out what kind of tips, what kind of things you're looking for, and maybe I can send something to you. Oh, brilliant. You see why I'm presenting with this wonderful woman? She thinks of these things. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Stewie, you had a question.
What stress got to do with that?
I'm sorry?
What stress got to do with it?
What stress has to do with it? Oh, thank you, Stuart. So stress is when we are so focused on something that we can't really listen well. It gets in our way of being the very best, bringing our, what we would call our A game forward. So stress is about what gets in our way of being the best person we can be. Okay? And I'm happy to talk a bit more about that afterwards if that wasn't satisfactory. Okay? Good question, Stuart.
Caroline,
yes.
Sorry, Caroline says, I can see a stress factor, an environmental factor being time.
One more time, Eric. You can see a stress factor.
Being just time, it's an environmental factor.
Speaking of stress.
Yeah. And I've got, sometimes there's time-bound things you have to be aware of when you're trying to apply a tool or a technique like this. For example, there may be an impending crisis. You can see this could go into crisis. And there's times when you have to just go into fix or something.
And there's still a way to do that with engagement. So stick around if you want to understand more.
But there's also things like, they can have core orders where part of the core order is that you have to have a demonstrable improvement in something by a certain time. So
that's correct.
Because this takes time to do well, I would guess.
Given that a lot of our work is with court-ordered families. So I agree, time is a huge issue. I'm not denying that, but it is possible within that framework to take into account some of this information.
Yes, just following on from Eric, fully believe exactly what you're saying, but when you have a family that's in crisis, sometimes you do have to come in and fix. But when it's a complicated situation which involves a lot of departments, a lot of different services, and when that system and between systems are broken, how do you resolve that? Does there need to be along beside that improvements of systems so positive solutions can be there for the family and the professionals?
That's such a good question. It's a tough one because often difficult folk to change are the systems and how the systems work. So I know the theory and I know how to do it, but there's many times the system doesn't go along with that. And then we have to deal with the fallout from that. So system change is what we're going for, and that's why throughout the state of Maryland, we're really working hard to train as many professionals as we can. And good news, judges are taking some of this training, and physicians, I'm training physicians at the University of Maryland, so some of them are taking this in so that hopefully in time there can be awareness of, as Susan said, the problem is that the person wants to address and how we listen to that concern and help them find within bounds of safety and requirements by the court, we help them find the best solution given the situation that they're in. Excellent question. Thank you for that.
If you substitute the word system for organizational culture, if you're trying to apply this into business or something, that I could see that being equally as
that's why it's
beneficial, or it could be.
That's why it's so important to have directors and administrators, finance people attend this training. Yeah.
Someone's asked, how have you found implementing FAN in Scotland?
Oh, great fun! Oh my goodness, have we had a good friends? Yes, it's because it's about human beings, and my goodness, what a wonderful welcome! I'm so honored to get to do this. So I'm learning, and Susan's doing her best to keep me right. But
there's probably a back thing to this. It's I can see it in social work, welfare, where you're interacting with human beings, feelings, emotions all the time. There are some organisations in Scotland that are a bit macho and touchy-feely as a difficult subject.
It is.
They wouldn't have done the exercise at the beginning.
Understood. Understand. Many people don't find that interesting. There are other ways to do it, and not everyone has to do that. Remember, I said it starts with us. If we want to help the system, it's us that does the mindful, intentional moment. We don't necessarily have to ask others to do it. I invited you because you came. I wanted you to have a sense of how someone going into that situation does it. Susan and I started our time together today with an intentional moment. That often doesn't work, but that doesn't keep me from doing it myself in a meeting.
And Carol, I was just going to add to that. So we've had the training, and it's something that comes up, and it relates to the previous question as well. We've had this training, and one of the things that I wanted to do was have the intentional moments, and we often will go from meeting to meeting, like I talked about, and that can be with social work, health visitors, school teachers, head teachers, police, etc. So what my key goal is in the next wee while, and like I've said before, is to have those intentional moments and invite those key players into having those intentional moments, and to understand that this is where we start going forward with that, and that might be the beginning of that awareness with those other people that we're working with as well, so they have a better understanding. And even if we do have things like court orders and things like that, participation starts with the person. They have to want to make the change before any kind of forms of change can happen, and that's the reason why we start at grassroots, and we start with the people that we're working with at their level.
You've actually answered one of the questions that came in about the want thing, the desire of the parties to want to get to a solution.
Yes.
Because the question actually was, do both parties have to want to get a solution, or can one person initiate it and steer it into a want from the other?
Excellent question. So to repeat the question, do both parties need to want the change, or can one person steer it? Okay, I would answer, that's not what FAN is about. Both parties do not have to want to change, but our goal is to provide that opening. If they're stuck and rigid, it's to do our best to provide an opening where they can feel heard and understood, and then it's their decisions. And this one, it's so hard, Susan, isn't it? When we work with families that aren't ready to make the change. I have to tell you though, as you know, I've been in this business a long time, this profession a long time, and it is surprising that I feel like I barely got it open, and I didn't think I made any difference to that family or that parent and child in my work, and it's a hard one. It's a hard one. That isn't a good feeling at the end of a day. And then about 5 years later, I will see that mother somewhere. She remembers me. I may not recognize her and her 5-year-old child, but she remembers doing what we would call a We Cuddle and Grow session, a play session with me, where I use these concepts. And she remembers doing that. So we never know when our engagement with another person may provide an opening that we do not know about. So, to answer the online person's friend, and again, thank you, online person, for asking the question. It's about us providing as much listening, tuning in, and understanding as we can, and then we trust that person to do what is best for them in that moment. And sometimes their choice is not to change.
Take one more question from the floor, and I've got one more in Slido, and then I'm going to have to bring it to a close just because of time. Okay.
Understood.
One down the front here.
What about reflecting back?
Sorry, I need to get on the mic.
Her question is, what about reflecting back? Do you care to see any more about that?
Telling the person what they thought the problem was,
To make sure that we're hearing correctly?
Yes.
That's very important. And in fact, if you noticed earlier on today, I did say that when I think I heard a question and I wanted to make sure I heard it correctly. So that's important, that I hear what that person was trying to tell me. Now, And so it's, when reflecting back, is much more getting clarification if I heard and understood correctly, not telling them what I heard, because if I'm telling them, I may not have understood them, and they may have felt less understood. So it's on me to do my best to reflect to make sure I've got it correctly. Interesting, quick sidebar. When I'm teaching physicians, one of the things I suggest to them is for them to ask their patient, what would you like me to remember from today? Because physicians are very busy people. Their minutes are incredibly expensive to have. So to make sure, if they can only ask one question in this direction of understanding, it's what would you like me to remember between now and the next time we meet? Because it addresses that question. You know, rather than me telling you what your treatment plan is, which is important, it has to be done. That's the doing that we all need to do. But in that, what is most important to you? Did I answer your question adequately? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Thanks for a very good question.
And one last thing. It's related to this, but I'll translate it as well. Your fan, it's not a rigid system, it's a model, it's a framework within which to work. And the person's written here, it's the system, but I'm going, the model seems to be constantly evolving. What developments do you anticipate happening in the future?
What an amazing question. That's incredible. I wonder if that's Cheryl Brown coming. Well, how wonderful, whoever that online person is, what an insightful question. The fan is an evolving thing, it's not static. When we've added, if you remember the art, the reflection at the end that Susan and I will be doing before we part today has been added because we've understood that it's equally important for us as presenters to take a moment and integrate from what we've learned from all of you today, because you're a part of our learning too. So we will do that. That's how it evolves, and it will continue. The big piece that we're working on, so this person obviously is sensitive to this, is social justice. How to bring social justice more into this work and be sensitive to cultural variables. That's why it's so important that Susan keeps me right, because I may not understand from the United States how things are seen here. So it's a very important question, and we do. It's a model that has to evolve to stay relevant.
Thank you. Can I just finish? Can I thank the audience both here in Kirkwall and also online for participating and adding comments?
We want to thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
Carol and Susan, can I thank you? One for a very interesting talk, but it's one of hope and positivity.
Thank you.
For both the individual, the relationship, the family, wider society, and beyond. I think it could
That's
be
the hope.
Extrapolated into
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, and can we thank Carol and Susan?
Well done. Thank you.
For those of you online, could you complete a feedback form? The link should be on YouTube or Slido now. And for those of you here in Orkney, could you fill in a paper form and leave it with the desk team? It helps us shape next year's festival and improve the experience for yourselves. I'd like to draw your attention to the Aviation Festival, and that follows on immediately after this festival, and it starts tomorrow on the 8th of September. There should be a link to it appearing in the YouTube feed, and we'll also post it on our social media so you can access it. But once again, Carol, Susan, thank you very much. And I echo my thanks to the tech team who just absolutely work wonders to make these events happen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
And if you would, put your sticky notes on the door as you go out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.